I talk a lot about sub-seasons within seasons. This sub-season is definitely watering season within late summer because the temperatures have gotten really hot, the rain spigot has been turned off, and all of us are slaves to our hose, whether we have an in-ground irrigation system or we are just hand watering all of our pots and things. So to kind of ease the pain of that and make it a little bit easier, let's talk about 5 ways to make watering your garden easier. But first, I have a question of the day for you. This is a little bit off topic, but Stuart and I have been talking about this as a way that I can answer lots of questions you have. Let me know if you would be interested in our doing some live chats where you guys, we will let you know when the predetermined time is. We'll probably start doing them on a scheduled basis, and you guys can ask questions and I will respond in real time. Anything that you want to know, unless it's too personal. So we will be kind of screening those questions. So let's get to the topic at hand, and that is about watering. Now, in general, and then in my garden in particular. Number 1, in general, we try to be as water wise as possible, and I can just say right now that I am so thankful that I am still able to water, because there are a lot of places around the country right now and you are very much on water rationing. In Oklahoma City, we are on an every other day schedule, whether we are in a drought or not, depending on what your address is. Like for me, I have an odd numbered address, so on odd numbered days of the month, I can water. And by watering, I mean any kind of automatic irrigation. So if you have an in-ground sprinkler system or even a hose end sprinkler like this one, you can do that on your designated day. So let's talk about best practices. Number 1, I know there's some controversy, and part of it depends a lot on your work schedule and other kinds of issues that you may have, but I always water in the morning when transpiration and evaporation are less and when it's just a more pleasant task to do. I water very first thing in the morning. Number 2, I try not to water in the heat of the day, either my hand watering or my in-ground irrigation system. I leave that for the morning or the evening. Why you don't want to water in the evening typically is because it can cause fungal problems. If you water in the evening and that the water that sits on top of your leaves, of your tomatoes, of your whatever, and it doesn't go ahead and evaporate, it can cause fungal problems and other issues. So in general, I am a morning waterer. Let me know when you guys water. I realize a lot of it's dependent on your schedule. Secondly, I do have an in-ground watering irrigation system, but I don't have it on automatic. I keep it on manual unless I'm going out of town. Why? Because I know my garden better than the sprinkling system knows my garden. And I know when it's raining. Some of them have a sensor which will turn it off automatically, but I know when my garden needs to be watered. And rather than setting each zone, for example, for like 20 minutes, I will set it maybe for 10 minutes, let it run through all of its zones, and then I'll come back and do it again. That way it has time for the moisture to really percolate down through the soil, and there's not unnecessary runoff. So there's kind of a tip. Now, here is another tip, and one of my first 5 products that makes things so much easier for me. This is like a $3 or $4. It is metal, so it's good quality. I think I got this one at Walmart, but I will put a link below to one you can probably find somewhere else online. And I find this absolutely indispensable. Why? Because I can do what I call target watering. Even though I have an automatic irrigation system, a lot of times things will happen. A plant will grow and it will block the mist head, or there'll be some kind of other issue. There may be areas that are just kind of dead zones that don't get as much moisture as others. So what I can do is I can put this down in an area that I really want to deeply irrigate. And I just set it in that spot. Now, the brilliant thing is, I don't want a real powerful jet of spray. I want one that is targeted. to a small circumference. So it will hit the area that I want it to hit without going to other areas that don't necessarily need the moisture, and more importantly, a lot of that will just evaporate into thin air. So this was, as I said, this was about $3 or $4. You can get them almost anywhere. I like it so much better than those that go back and forth like this. It goes in a circular, very targeted pattern. So I can put it in a place, really leave it on for a period of time to deep water, and then turn it off. And that is a way to cover your dead zones if you have an in-ground irrigation system. I find this absolutely indispensable. So that would be my #1 tip for making watering easier and more effective for you. Now let's move on to #2. I absolutely love this product, and it has helped make watering so much easier for me. So what it is basically is a splitter. It's got one connection that hooks up to your faucet that then transforms into two. So you can have two different hoses connected to the same faucet, and there's an on-off valve here, so you can leave one on and turn the other one off. Now why I like this is because in my front yard I can have one hose that connects that I use out in the garden. It's a longer hose, it's a little bit more flexible, but it's got more length on it, and so I can dedicate it to my garden beds out in the yard. This other one is connected to just a short expanse of tubing that then connects to a very short hose that I use specifically and only just for my porch. So when I'm watering my window boxes, my urns, all of the things on my front porch, I don't have to wrangle this really long hose and weave it around the exterior brick wall to then be able to water the things that are on the porch. This way, it's just over the brick wall. I can water all of those things very, very easily, and because this is dedicated, it goes to that spot specifically. So you might want to consider getting one of these splitters, both in the front and the back, for your watering needs. And now here for my third tip. Never use a longer hose when a shorter hose will do. I don't know what it is, but I always default on the side of buying a longer hose until recently when I was kind of hit with a club over my head and realized that a longer hose just means that I have to wrestle a longer hose to get the job done, and it's not always necessary. So for my front porch and even for my back area, I get what I call a boutique hose. So this is a shorter hose. You can see it's even got a smaller diameter. This one comes from Gardener's Supply, and it comes in a winding casement where I can wind it up if I so choose. But what I like about it is that it is shorter. I can contain it at the end of my porch, and then for watering my window box, for these pots right here, it's just very short. When I am finished, I can then wind it back up into its storage case, and I don't have to wrangle that long flexible hose all the way around this brick wall. It's a straight shot over the brick wall on the west side to my window box. So whenever possible, use a shorter hose when it will suffice, not a longer hose. And speaking of knowing thy garden, I can't emphasize enough the importance of really being familiar with the water needs of your own garden. And no one knows that better than you, which is one of the reasons when we go on vacation, we have so many problems when someone else comes to water our containers and such. But here's an example of what I'm talking about. On my front porch, if I water adequately, which means to really saturate for a long period of time until the water runs out the bottom of my window box, I only have to do that every other day. I don't need to do it every single day because I am watering well versus watering just very superficially where I'm only moistening the top layer of dirt. This way I know that I'm watering it deeply and it's deeply saturated. But my point for this, this expanse right here is to also know the difference between a plant and a leaf or just foliage that needs to be watered and some that is just heat stressed. And here is a perfect example. I did not water this today, and you can see that this foliage over here of this coleus, this lantana, this celosia, it's pretty perky, and it really doesn't look too droopy. Now, if you progress to this side of the window box, which was just more recently in full sun than the other side of the window box, you'll notice that this stuff is a little bit droopy. Now, it doesn't necessarily need to be watered because it's as hydrated as the other end of the window box. It's just that this one was heat stressed more recently, and so these leaves are kind of droopy. And a way to tell that is the finger test. So don't hesitate to just insert your finger into the soil to 1 or 2 inches down to see if the soil is moist. If it is, then it doesn't need to be watered. It's just heat stressed, just like the rest of us. Now let's go to the back and I'll talk about number 4. Now number 4 and number 5, I give complete credit to you guys out there. I don't take any ownership whatsoever other than the fact that I am passing along tips that you guys have given me. So I put on there a while ago about how vexing it was for me because so many of my valves, my faucets, everything leaked, and you guys recommended that instead of changing out the washers that I use some plumber's tape. And I did that and it worked brilliantly, and I cannot thank you enough. So use plumber's tape on your connections to prevent unnecessary water loss. The next one you also told me about. I think it might have been my friend Kylie. Actually, a number of you told me about it. And these were these metal quick connects. These are brilliant, you guys. So I've got 2 hoses in the back. On this one, I have my garden feeder on it. And yes, for my ornamentals in containers, I do use Miracle-Gro. Not for my edibles and not in the ground, but for my ornamentals in containers, I do use Miracle-Gro. But I don't want to use Miracle-Gro all of the time because I don't want to overfeed them. So I do this about once a week, and then I switch it out with the sprayer that's on my other hose in the back. And I can do that so easily. First of all, there's an on-off valve here. So I can turn it on and off at the point of contact, which I really, really love. But the other thing is, every time I want to connect this feed sprayer, I don't have to try to mess with all of this. If you've got arthritis in your hands or some other disability, that can be really problematic. But with this quick connect, all I do is push back this section here. Can you see that, Stuart? And I just pull this out. Now, the other hose end sprayer that I have, which does not have a feeder attached, it is just a metallic hose end sprayer. All I have to do is just push this back, put it in, and it clicks in place. So each time I am not having to remove one, put the other one in, and it can be a little bit complicated and difficult. This way I can easy on, easy off, switch out what I want to switch out. Now my other hose also has this assemblage right here, so when I take this and I move it to the other hose, all I do is just click this back into place. It's absolutely brilliant. I think for 2 quick connects, it's about $16. I highly recommend the metal ones, not any plastic ones. I'll put a link below. I've just ordered more of them myself because they work so brilliantly. Now, I want to emphasize a point I made earlier. Back here is where I have done just the wrong thing, and that's that I got a hose that was way too long for a small space. So I'm constantly unkinking it, untangling it from surrounding pots and surrounding foliage when I could have just put on one that was shorter and didn't cause me all of those entanglement issues. Now I know you're going to ask me, what hose do I recommend? Let me tell you, I don't know. That's the holy grail we need to be constantly in search of, is a hose that is truly lightweight, non-kink, and reliable. And I personally don't think that such a thing exists. Some are better than others, but I really don't think any of them are completely non-kink are completely kink-free and don't have those kinds of issues. So if you have one that kind of meets the test, then make sure to put that below. But basically, I would just say that as a rule, all hoses have their problems. And it's just kind of like I hate anything that has to be wired into the wall or cabled into the wall. I want everything to be wireless and hoseless. So that is my number 4 and my number 5, and then I've got a final point that I want to make. And here's my bonus suggestion. If you use a hose end sprayer and it's trigger operated, you might consider replacing it with one that is thumb operated. So you can easily with your thumb turn it on and off. And again, if you have mobility issues in your hand, or even if you don't, I promise you that this type is far less fatiguing and easier to use. I'd also recommend that when you get one of these, and I'll put a link to some brands below, that you get one that's metal, not an inexpensive plastic one that can be very problematic. And lastly, this is kind of a personal message. Make sure that your garden isn't the only thing that stays hydrated. Make sure that you stay hydrated too. So this is a case of do what I say, not what I do, because I ran into some issues last week. I have been working on my book, and I've been sitting at my desk drinking lots of coffee and lots of iced tea and not hydrating enough. And last week, when I felt I had time to get back with my trainer, I went at it full force, but I wasn't hydrated enough, and I ran into some issues. I actually had edema in my arms and had some issues that I could have avoided had I been more hydrated. So this is my message to you. Even if you're not thirsty, even if you don't think you need it, please make sure that you hydrate. And if you've got any loved ones or helpers that are out in your garden, make sure they stay hydrated as well. Whenever I have someone helping me out in the garden, I always make sure to offer them a cool drink and some ice water. So make sure that you stay as hydrated as your garden.